the whole of humankind is caught in a thermodynamic trap. It is lethal, and the critical time horizon, to the best of our knowledge, is around 2030. It's not that the world stops in 2030. It's a time horizon in the sense that after that, the cascade of events become very, very difficult to handle.
Hello and welcome to Planet Critical, the podcast for a world in crisis. My name is Rachel Donald. I'm a climate corruption journalist and your host. Every week I interview experts who are battling to save our planet. My guests are scientists, politicians, academics, journalists, and activists. They explain the complexities of the energy, economic, political, and cultural crises we face today, revealing what's really going on and what they think needs to be done. These are the stories of the big picture. Go to planetcritical.com to learn more and subscribe. My guest this week is Lou Arnoux. Louis is a scientist, engineer, and entrepreneur committed to the development of sustainable ways of living and doing business. He is also the managing director of Fourth Transition, a collection of scientists who are thermodynamically analyzing the reality of our energy systems and offering alternative models of producing, harvesting, and sharing energy. This is a stunning episode. In the first half, Louis runs through the energy problem thermodynamically, why our energy systems are inefficient, why they are certainly headed for collapse, the trap of the thermodynamics of our energy system, including why decarbonizing with renewables is a trap, and how this energy system, this human-made energy system, works antithetically to how the sun and life on this planet works thermodynamically. At this point, you might be thinking this is going to be a very technical episode. It is, but Louis explains this really, really well. This is a really clear run through and overview of the problem scientifically. Arriving at the question, well, how is it that we managed to get here? How is it, despite having plenty of information for hundreds of years about thermodynamics, how did we manage to get it all wrong? And the answer, of course, being economics. Louis says that economics and thermodynamics are fundamentally incompatible, which is an impossibility because you cannot be incompatible with thermodynamics. He explains this in more detail, what it is in particular about our economic system and way of thinking that is incompatible with thermodynamics, before revealing this new energy system that he and his colleagues are working on that would be 400% efficient, decentralized, accessible to all, and facilitate a real transition not just of our energy systems, but of our entire way of organizing ourselves as a species that would finally put our systems in a similar model to that of life, which is, in essence, a giant heat pump. I hope you all enjoy the episode. If you do, please share it far and wide. And if you're loving the show, become a patron on Patreon or support Planet Critical with a paid subscription at planetcritical.com. By signing up, you'll get the Planet Critical newsletter inspired by each episode delivered straight to your inbox every week. You'll also have access to the wonderful Planet Critical community who are full of inspiring thoughts, ideas, critiques, and determination. The links are in the description box below. I'm so grateful to everyone who chooses to support the project. I'm a vehement believer in ad-free and open access content, so Planet Critical wouldn't exist without the direct support of the amazing community. Thank you so much to all of you who believe in Planet Critical and keep the project going every week. Louis, thank you so much for joining me on Planet Critical. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure too for me. Thank you.
My first question for you is, why is the world in crisis?
That's a very big question. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start by saying that to understand how and why, it's necessary to have some in-depth knowledge in about four main disciplinary domains. And to do that in a transdisciplinary way, so not compartmentalized. Those four main categories are thermodynamics, system dynamics, the ecology of the whole of life on Earth, and anthropology. Terms about 3 million years of human evolution. Plus, obviously, a fair amount of engineering expertise because we live in an engineering world. in an engineered world. So that's what I'm going to draw from to answer your question. um, and in terms of crisis, what we use the term uh, produced by anthropologist Edgar Morin in the 90s, which is polycrisis. In terms from our point of view, the global crisis is an avalanche of problems and crises of all sorts that are not independent from each other, but they are codependently evolving and forming this avalanche. And the metaphor on avalanche is important because in mathematical term, this kind of phenomenon is called a self-organizing criticality. And the typical example of a SOC, a self-organizing criticality, is an avalanche. You have a slab of snow up mountain for some reason starts sleeping. It makes more snow sleeping, and the whole thing ends up tumbling down, and will keep tumbling down until it can settle at a lower energy level down mountain. That's what's happening globally. And the main driver, which is most people are blind to, the main driver is thermodynamic. And I stress thermodynamic, not energy. And we'll discuss that a bit more because when you say energy, people haven't got a clue what you mean. They will think oil, coal, natural gas, wind, solar. But none of that is energy. Energy is a very specific matter, a very specific notion in physics. Most people are not familiar with. So to attract their attention, to say, look, no, if you say energy, you really don't know what you're talking about. I prefer to stress thermodynamics. That's my answer so far. Right, and then we can dive into it.
Well, I think we should continue diving into it. What is the relationship between these four main disciplines, thermodynamics, system dynamics, ecology, anthropology, with a spot of engineering that has created a world that is on the brink of collapse?
Right. More than the spot of engineering, but yes. The point is, okay, let's start with thermodynamics because it's really the driver of all that. It is something some of us started to understand in the 1970s, so it doesn't come out of the blue. Those initial analysis were tentative, and progressively more data has piled up, and we have analyzed that data. I mean, I'm want to say we it's a group. It's not a formal group. It's a bunch of scientists scattered around the planet have been working on that, and progressively, what has transpired is what I'm going to explain. And it's only over the last 2 years, really, that we realized we had enough data and could analyze that in such a way that we know for sure where we stand. And yes, it is scary. All right. So, if I may, I can summarize that. Let's start with saying that effectively we are now, by we, I mean nearly the whole of humankind is trapped in, is caught in a thermodynamic trap. It is lethal, and the critical time horizon, to the best of our knowledge, is around 2030. It's not that the world stops in 2030. It's a time horizon in the sense that after that, the cascade of events become very, very difficult to handle. So effectively, time is running short, and the whole of decision making has been running blind for about 300 years since the first industrial revolution. So what is that trap? In fact, it's a triple trap, thermodynamic trap. I'll discuss first the first one. To live, to function, for a civilization to thrive, it needs a global energy supply and use system. That system has to be self-powered, in terms it extracts energy from wherever it can, use energy to do that, and delivers a surplus to the non-energy part of a society or a civilization. In our case, civilization is global, whole of the industrialized world, and the global energy supply and use system over the centuries has grown enormous and very complex. The one important point is that its efficiency in thermodynamic term is extremely low. At the peak, probably around 2010, the efficiency of the whole of the global energy supply and use system, we estimate, was around 12%.
And that's for the fossil fuel energy supply.
No.
Because
All energy included.
But isn't the vast majority of the energy system in 2010
It's the majority, but it includes also nuclear, geothermal, biomass, solar, wind, everything.
Okay.
The energy of that system was around 12%, and it is now declining. So to use a system like that, to supply us, the end users, and in an increasing amount every year, means that we have an accelerated depletion of resources. Because if your efficiency is maximum 12%, and the net, the 12% grows very fast, it means that the gross grows even faster. Okay?
And that's because we're essentially wasting 88%.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
And is that because if there's 12% efficiency is one way to think about it, that we're wasting 88%?
We are wasting 88%, yeah, and now a bit more. Okay. And it's also important to realize, because you asked me, I include so-called renewables in that. Because at the moment, the renewables, and a number of researchers have pointed that out over the last 2 years, renewables are not replacing fossil fuels. They're adding to the system, but it's not a substitution process. The intention is to replace, but at the moment, it's not happening. And we know why. Okay. So the problem there, the core problem, is that the total energy cost of getting energy, measured in joules, we are not talking dollars here, purely thermodynamics, the total energy cost of getting energy is now getting very close to the total amount of energy we are getting. And a civilization, any civilization, lives on a difference between the total cost and the total gross. That is being squished. And to the best of our knowledge, sometime in the early 2030s, we get zero. That's bad news. And when you get zero, everything stops.
And this is energy return on energy investment?
No, energy return is an attempt to approach that analysis, but it's very crude and misses a lot of stuff. Okay. So it's in the same vein, but it's a lot sharper.
Right.
Okay. Why is it sharper? Because instead of just looking at the whole system in aggregate, we look at the structure of that system and realize that there are two main components. oil, and the rest. The rest includes everything, including renewables.
Mm-hmm.
The point being that you can't get the rest. You can't get solar, you can't get wind, you can't get coal or natural gas or anything else without transport fuels derived from oil. Now, until recently means about 10, 15 years ago, the only supply system, energy supply system, that was fully self-powered was the oil part. So you drill for oil, you get oil, you use the energy in the oil to drill more and process and deliver transport fuels.
Mm-hmm.
That was fine. The situation now, as a result of the accelerated depletion of the oil source, is that oil, and people haven't realized that, even large oil companies haven't realized that because they think and work in financial terms.
Mm-hmm.
Oil is no longer an energy source. And that takes a while to sink in. The total cost of getting oil, transporting it, processing it, delivering transport fuels and petrochemicals is more than the energy contained in the oil.
Mm.
Which means that the oil industry, very large and complex system, is forced to draw energy from all other energy sources.
Yes, there are quite amazing stories right now of wind turbines being built on top of oil
Exactly,
rigs.
in the North Sea
Yeah.
and in the Gulf of Mexico and so on. So this is a bit of a problem because the non-oil sources require transport fuel derived from oil to function. So we are in a situation, we are a bit like a mad dog running round and round in circles, trying to bite its own tail. The problem there is that to keep doing that and still deliver some net energy to the non-oil part of the world forces that system, that the global energy supply and use system, to inflate, to increase exponentially. And that can last only for a very short period of time until it all collapses. So we are now on very, very close to what we also refer to as a thermodynamic cliff, to the point where the whole system breaks down. And what scared us when people like Alistair Hamilton, whom you interviewed before, me and a few others came to realize late 2022 and last year, is that point of going splat at the bottom of the cliff, so to speak, is now very, very close. We are on the edge of a cliff. So that's the first thermodynamic trap, because we have no way of getting out of that sequence. It keeps going on like a train wreck, to use another metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in addition to that, we are also locking ourselves in a second trap. And as you will see, everything I'm discussing effectively comes back to the matter of decision making. How do we make decisions? The second trap is that people say, oh, right, we have global warming. That's because we're putting too much carbon in the atmosphere. Therefore, we have to decarbonize. Okay, so it's a whole dynamic of decarbonizing with renewables. Looks fine, except that in doing that, people are focusing on symptoms and trying to deal with symptoms. They are not dealing with the fundamental thermodynamic cause, which I've just explained. That's the first trap. So on top of the first trap, they're adding a second trap, which is to invest massive amount in renewables to get out of trouble. when you look at it piecemeal, okay, one wind farm here, a solar farm there, and so on, it looks fine. And you look at financial terms, yeah, the price of solar panels is declined enormously. Same for wind turbines and the like. When you do a thermodynamic analysis of the whole dynamic, you realize that you're creating a thermodynamic trap, because as you build capacity for renewables, you drain additional energy from the existing system, the existing global energy supply and use system, just at the time when that system is on the verge of collapsing. So you actually accelerate the trend towards collapse. And a number of researchers have pointed that out. In France, one guy who has pointed that out is Jean-Baptiste Fressoz, for example, is pointing out, yeah, we are not replacing the old system with the new. We are just adding a new layer of renewables on top of the rest. And it's a big problem. Then you have the third trap, which is also a thermodynamic trap, which is to a large extent related to the first principle of thermodynamics and the second. First principle of thermodynamics says, in a sense, that energy is never created nor destroyed. You play with it. And the second principle says that as you play with it, you lose access to a chunk. So for the last 300 years, since the very, very early days of the Industrial Revolution, we have been using energy in a very inefficient manner. The first steam systems, the first steam powered pump and the Watts engine were between 0.5 and 2% efficient. Since then, we have created engines which are far more efficient, up to 50%. But the total system, which has gone more and more complex, has only managed to get to about 12% efficiency. Okay, so the energy we waste, which you noted earlier, 88% or more, doesn't disappear. It stays around us. It's low-grade energy, but it's around us. It's called entropy in thermodynamics. Now, over that period of, roughly speaking, 300 years, we have put in the Earth system something like 25 zetajoules of entropy. Now, most people haven't got a sense of what a zetajoule is, all right? The total energy used at the moment globally is around 0.65 zetajoules.
Is that annually?
Yeah. So 25 zetajoules, stuck in the environment is big. Now, there is an aspect of life on Earth which is very important in this matter. You have heard of the notion of Gaia by Lovelock and Margulis and a few others. We don't like that term. Not just my little group, but a number of scientists don't like that term, because Gaia is one of the many names of the ancient great goddess, to whom humans have offered human sacrifices for thousands of years. Okay, so it's not a good idea to anthropomorphize something which has nothing to do with humans. So instead of referring to Gaia, and a lot of New Age people go into all sorts of fancy ideas about that, we prefer to call it, in a more kind of scientific way, Earth life. In other terms, it's the way life on Earth interacts with the Earth system and effectively keep it going. The atmosphere we breathe is the result of life's activity over billions of years, for example. So what life does, and that's the work of, is relying on the work of German researcher Axel Clayden. L- Life on Earth receives about 510 terawatt of power from the sun.
Is that annually, daily?
Terawatt is in power. It's like a gigantic power station. Okay.
Yes, but over how much time?
No. Power is energy per unit of time.
Okay.
Watt is a joule per second. Not to confuse power with energy. Energy is measured in joules. Power is measured in watts.
Okay.
So terawatt, 500 terawatt is seriously big.
Because that's over an hour.
Sorry?
But it's still not clear to me. I'm not a scientist.
Okay.
Over how much time is a terawatt?
For example, the total installed power generation, electrical power generation of the US, fossil-based, is about 1 terawatt.
Oh, wow.
All right? I'll give you a scale. Now, what's happening here on Earth is that life cascades that power, the energy it gets through that power, and recycle it, and recycle it, and recycle it. So the total power Earth life effectively mastermind users is 2,261 terawatt. So it starts with 510 terawatt from the sun and amplifies that through recycling the waste energy and so on to 2,261 terawatt. In other terms, Earth life on Earth functions like a gigantic heat pump. Okay? So it does that with solar energy. But it also does that with what we do with our waste heat. So we pumped into the system 25 zetajoules over 300 years. It has amplified that to something around 500 zetajoules. That's the excess heat stored in the Earth system at the moment. Plus quite a few other matters, because in the meantime we have also destroyed a lot of soil, which is also entropy. We have put a lot of pollution in water and so on and so forth. So 500 zetajoules is really a minimum figure. And as I said before, we only have access to 0.65 zetajoules per year. Now, those 500 zetajoules, whether we like it or not, we have to handle that. Professor Elliot Jacobson in the US has recomputed that to help people get a sense of what the size of it. And he did that in terms of the power of an Hiroshima bomb, nuclear bomb. So 500 zetajoules is in the order of 28 billion Hiroshima bombs around us.
I've got a quick question, sorry. Because if energy cannot be created or destroyed, how is it that life is kind of recycling energy from these 25 zetajoules of entropy that we've put into the atmosphere into 500 zetajoules?
Yeah.
How?
The same way as it does it with solar energy. I mean, you know about hurricanes, right?
No, I do. I'm thinking about that first law of thermodynamics, which is that energy can neither be created or destroyed.
The way that life cascades things, for example, the Earth's solar heating, it hits the ocean, water evaporates, it climbs up in the clouds, it's cold out there, it condenses, make clouds, and then the wind is a result of also an imbalance of heating as the Earth rotates and the season and so on. Wind is indirect solar energy. So the wind pushes the clouds away, clouds hit mountain, it rains. That many tons of water up there, down on the ground, it's a release of energy. Then the water goes down torrents, rivers to the sea. That's also an energy process. And it goes on like this.
But how is it more energy?
It's not more.
How does life
It's
cascade
changing
energy from
form.
25? Hang on, let me finish my question. How does life cascade energy from 25 zetajoules to 500 zetajoules?
Exactly the same process, roughly speaking, as it cascades energy coming from the sun. It's not going to do with our pollution in any different way than what it does with the solar energy coming from the sun. It functions as a heat pump through many different complex mechanisms, which is what's called the Earth system. And that's what happened. So if we're stupid enough to generate that much entropy, well, it's going to fly back on our face, and it's starting to fly back on our face right now.
Okay, so let me just try and summarize this. So it's not that an extra 475 zetajoules of energy is being created, but rather the 25 zetajoules of entropy that Homo sapiens, that humankind is putting into the atmosphere, is going through Earth systems and being amplified and cascaded through all the rest of life to eventually reach 500 zetajoules.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, that brings us to the point of trying to get a sense of what do we mean by energy. Because if we don't understand that, we won't be able to get out of trouble. So far, I've explained that we are locked in three little straps, which are kind of nested together. So most of humankind is in colloquially dead man walking situation. It's locked in and it's a lethal trap. The big question is how to get out of there. All right? In a hurry. And we won't be able to get out of there unless we understand how we got there. And to do that, we have to understand what we mean by energy. A lump of coal is not energy. A gallon of petrol or a barrel of oil is not energy. It's a store of energy in chemical form. So what do we mean by energy itself? Energy is not a substance. Energy is a gradient between a high point and a low point along a dimension. The dimension can be temperature, pressure, chemical bond, kinetic movement, this sort of thing. But it's not a substance. It's a gradient. And whether it's life doing it or us doing it, I mean in engineering terms, it's a matter of playing with gradients. So for example, you have behind a dam, you have a gradient between a high point and low point. At the bottom there, you put at the bottom of the dam, you put a turbine, which converts that gradient into a mechanical form. So you change from one gradient to another gradient. And that rotates an electrical power generator. We transform the mechanical form into an electrical form, a voltage differential, which sends the electron down the line. But each time you do that, you lose something. And it's in the way we have been structuring that where we have massively messed up. Okay? Now, the big question is, because it sounds stupid, well, why are we doing it that way? Is to realize that thermodynamics is, thermodynamics is the branch of physics which sustains everything else. it's recognized now generally by a lot of scientists that it's the basis for everything else. Some call it a meta-science. Okay, so that discipline emerged at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So we have known the basics for a very long time. So the big question is, okay, we have known the basics, scientists have understood that. How come we managed to mess up and lock ourselves not only once, but 3 times? Okay? And that's the main thing we're now coming to terms with, because unless we understand that, we won't get out of trouble. And to go straight to the point, the main reason is economics.
Yes.
Okay? The point, not because we did the wrong economics, is the very notion of economics has been the factor in terms of decision making. That has locked us in that very difficult situation we're in. So that's what I would like to discuss with you now. Let's say we have known now for quite some time. Some people started to query the interaction between thermodynamics and economics in the 1880s.
Wow.
Okay. One of the guys, the main one, was a Ukrainian aristocrat exiled in Paris, Sergei Polodonsky. He tried to engage in a conversation with Marx, who was also in Paris at the time. It didn't work because neither understood really what they were talking about, basically. So it petered out, and Marx died very soon after. And that was the end of it for a while. More recently, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, an economist, a Romanian-American, Nicolas Josescu-Rogan, started to realize, yes, there are problems with thermodynamics, with economics. It doesn't fit with thermodynamics. But as an economist, it didn't quite get to the heart of the matter, so it didn't quite work either. And then a number of people in the 70s onwards understood matters much better. One of them is a colleague of mine in France, a colleague and friend. He's now emeritus professor of economics, Serge Latouche. Serge is better known internationally for being in favor of degrowth. Serge and I have had debates in the past that I've given up because it can't work. It's a good idea. It looks like a good idea. It's seductive, but it's more like what Professor Mori Bonaiuti in the University of Milan in Italy has pointed out. It's more like it's an involuntary degrowth just falling upon us. Okay. But the point is, Serge is one of those few, very, very few guys in the 70s who have started to understand that there is an incompatibility between economics and thermodynamics. And that's bad news because you can't be incompatible with thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is that economics has never been a science. It's not a science and will never be a science. Economics have always, right from the beginning, wanting to be on the par with physics. And sorry, no, it can't be. So let's dive. I will highlight one important point. There's plenty to discuss, but the key point
Louis,
to understand.
Before we go into economics and thermodynamics, I have one question about everything that you said in the first half, which is the problem of depleting our energy system when it's already on the point of collapse
Yeah.
in order to build up renewable capacity.
Yeah, that's the
and
second
that
trap.
being because all fuel sources are dependent on transport fuel. I just have to ask, because I'm sure people are thinking about it, what about batteries with regards to transport?
What about?
If we replaced our fuel of transport from oil to batteries, would that circumnavigate the thermodynamic problem?
Okay, let's deal with that. It's a very good and important question. All right. You know the myth, the Greek myth of Sisyphus.
Is that who rolled the boulder up the hill?
It's the guy with the boulder pushing the boulder uphill, and as it goes up to the top, boom, it goes back down. That's the situation we are in now. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we have managed to lay our hands on very accessible, large stores of energy: coal, wood, oil, natural gas. And effectively, the existence of those stores of energy is the result of the Earth system of Earth life over the years functioning like a very large battery. That's the work of Shramsky and his colleagues in the US. It's a very good paper published in 2015, which went basically unnoticed, except by a few people like us. But it's a very important paper. Effectively, for 4 and something billion years, life on Earth, as soon as life emerged, it started to function like a battery charger. Gets energy from the sun, grows and accumulates stores of energy in chemical form. So the battery is effectively Earth and outer space. Waste energy it exports to outer space, and it accumulates, it charges inside of life. Humans have depleted their battery at a very fast rate, initially by deforestation and so on, and soil depletion. And then since the Industrial Revolution, and more particularly since the after World War II period in the 1950s, I mean, people talk of now of the Great Acceleration, there has been a massive surge of depleting that battery. So once you have depleted your battery, you're back to Sisyphus. You have to do it yourself. You have to find a way of playing with a dimension and create a gradient, and then going down, and create a gradient and going down. So whether you do it by pumping water uphill, or you mine lithium, use energy to mine lithium and then create batteries with that, you're forced to mimic what life has done for billions of years. But you try to do that in a very short period of time with technologies which are grossly inefficient. So it doesn't take much effort in thermodynamic terms, if you look at the whole system, to realize it's not going to work very well. Yes, you can make very relatively effective lithium batteries, the cutting edge and so on. But to scale that at the level of the point of replacing the old global energy supply and new system, the acronym is Jesus, GESUS. It's a bit funny, but so Jesus 1, Jesus 2, going about it with current battery technologies, you won't make it.
Can you keep digging into that for me? Because typically the angle that I've covered on Planet Critical has been access to materials, the fact that these are also finite supplies, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of battery proponents will come back and say the technology is advancing at a rate of knots. the efficiency is getting better all the time. We're finding new ways of creating batteries, like from sodium now, not just lithium.
I understand. This is the people saying that people essentially relying on economics and not understanding a thing about the thermodynamics of a complex system. You have to think about from mine to grave, plus all the recycling in between, in dynamic terms, to replace one existing system with another system. Now, the mathematics of that are known. They were developed in the 1980s. There are very good PhD theses on that. We have known since then that the way we're going about it now can't work.
Okay.
But people who, and it's very exciting work. I mean, doing the physics, the engineering of advanced batteries is very exciting, and it's necessary. But it won't, on its own, get us out of trouble.
And why exactly? Why is it that?
Because it doesn't change the overall efficiency of the whole system. We are still below 12%.
Even if we shifted everything, and like let's
let's
adopt a little bit. Let me finish my question, please. Yeah. Let's adopt a little bit of fantasy for a second, right? And just say we had an abundant supply of everything that we needed, and we could just switch everything to a renewable economy. What would that do to the efficiency of the system?
It will kill it.
Why?
Because there is no such easy way, abundance, blah, blah, to shift from the old one to the new one. Shifting from the old one to the new one requires a huge amount of energy. Which we haven't got. So it boils down. It boils down to very simple thermodynamics. I mean, the system is amazingly complex, but the principles of it to assess the matter are fairly simple. So the point earlier on, if you remember, I said oil is no longer an energy source. We still use it. We use other sources of energy to mine oil and do things with it. Oil is at what I call the diamond stage of the oil industry. We mine diamond. Diamond is pure carbon. We don't mine diamond for the energy it contains, but because some people find diamonds pretty to look at and they value them much. So we spend a huge amount of energy to mine little stones, which we cut in nice ways. Okay. At the moment, something similar is happening with oil. We don't mine oil to have a net energy output because it's gone. We mine oil because it contains very attractive energy molecules with chemical bonds in them, which functions as a battery. It's a store of energy. You put diesel in your car or gasoline, whatever. You put a liquid battery in it. That battery is more than 60 times more energy dense than the best lithium battery. That's why fundamentally, they don't necessarily know it, but why fundamentally the oil industry keeps going. They sell liquid batteries effectively. Okay? But because of that, they are dependent on a system which is dying, the rest of the Jesus, that effectively has a very short lifespan left in it. So unless we wake up and change that, we're in trouble. In trouble means a population crash. I agree with the work of Professor Christopher Bystroff in the US. We're looking at a population crash of in the order of 6 billion people between 2020 and 2050. Jesus. And note that I'm saying 2020 and not saying 24. Because we know it's already in train. But we don't notice it too much because we say, oh, there's so many million people dying from extreme heat per year. others from extreme cold, and then from drought, and then from hunger, and from epidemic, and so on. But this is part of the polycrisis, where all of these deaths are interrelated.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, I estimate about 40 million people dying per year out of the whole avalanche. And it's likely to, unless we change tack, it's likely to climb to 100 million, 200 million, and we're going to lose 6 billion people very rapidly.
God.
Okay. This is the reality people are blind to. So the big question is, how come they are still blind to? The science is there. The science has been in development for 300 years. How come? And that brings us back to economics. So very simple. It's actually very simple, but people don't see it because of their indoctrination, their preconception, their belief system. What I explained about energy, it's not a substance, it's a gradient along a dimension. The point there, which is very important, is you can't replace it with anything else. To live in whatever form, you need that gradient, which is a non-substance. And unless you have that gradient, you're dead. The paper I mentioned by Framsky and colleagues from 2015 presents that very well. And it says, okay, equilibrium is unpleasant and final. It's death.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are on the verge of that. So it's time to wake up. Now, the point that energy cannot be replaced with anything else is sufficient to invalidate the whole of economics, the whole of the use of money, and the whole of finance. Energy is not a commodity you can swap with other commodities. There is a thought process which enables people, without being specialists, to go a bit further than that. I explained earlier on the GESUS, the Global Energy Supply and Use System, on one hand, and the non-energy industrial world on the other hand. All right, you with me? So we have two systems which are coupled. And that's what people call the global economy, between inverted quotes, because economy is nonsense. Okay, so we have these two systems coupled together. One is inflating very rapidly, and the other one is forced to shrink. And very soon, the whole thing collapses. So let's assume that there is enough decision-making taking place on the energy supply side to think about energy pricing. I'm not saying coal or oil or electricity, I'm saying energy. This thing between gradients. And one possibility is to decide that to make the system last a bit longer, we put high energy prices. What it means is for the non-energy part of the global so-called economy, only some will be able to afford it. Mm-hmm. So you prolongate the system by effectively killing a large chunk of people. Mm-hmm. Because if it can't replace energy with anything else, if you don't have access to it, they die. Mm-hmm. The other alternative at the other end of the spectrum is we keep energy prices low so that we don't kill people. But in which case, the life of the system is drastically shortened and we still kill people. In other terms, if you think in terms of prices, you can't put a price on energy. Mm-hmm. you're forced to reach the conclusion, which we have known for a long time, as tiny minority on the planet, is that energy is priceless. Can't price it.
Mm-hmm.
That end of the day is the whole of economics. Now, there is a consequence to that. Is at the moment, in an economist's mind, they equate energy like any other commodity with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do a little mind consideration. Let's say that I use 10 kilowatt of energy in a day for doing something. And that costs me 2 euros. And I can go to the local supermarket and buy a packet of ground coffee for 2 euros. 250 grams, 2 euros. From an economist's point of view, they put an equal sign in between.
Yeah.
10 kilowatt equals a packet of coffee.
Ground coffee.
150 grams. But if you look at how that coffee was produced, depending where it was produced and the supply channel and so on, anything like 100 kilowatt hour of energy to 2 kilowatt hours of energy have been used to produce that coffee. It's very unlikely that it will be exactly 10 kilowatt hour, the amount of energy I want to trade it against. So the conclusion is that if you want to do things in fair and equitable terms, because energy is priceless, you can't price anything else either. See my point?
Yeah.
In other terms, yes, you can put prices on things, but it will never be equitable. Using money and doing economics and doing accounting will always involve some swindle somewhere. Some benefit and others don't. Okay? Now, I'm going to introduce another notion now on that about risk. Because not only there is swindles, but quite often they're actually human sacrifice. Because the game is to make money. You start, and I use the term peanuts to avoid the notion of currency, dollars, euros, and so on. You get stuff for 2 peanuts, and you sell stuff for 4 peanuts. That's the name of the game. You have accumulated 2 more peanuts. The stuff you acquire and the stuff you sell could be the same, could be different. You have processes. It doesn't matter. The name of the game is to start with money and end up with more money. Okay? So there is an apparent parallel between money and energy, because money is not a substance. The problem is that when you handle money, you negate thermodynamics. Money is a human creation. It's not physical. It's a process to actually swindle people because it's never going to fit with thermodynamics. And you can't cheat thermodynamics, but you can cheat people. That's how it works. And this is the notion of risk. Before I get into that, you can do this money-making thing and economics in legal fashion, or you can do it illegally. You can trade cocaine, for example, or you can trade humans, slavery, and so on, or you can be in a gray area in between. But the mechanism is exactly the same. Money, stuff, money. Now, the question is a matter of risk. The word risk in English or in French or Italian or whatever is derived from the Arabic rizq. R is transliterated RIZQ. And in rough terms, fundamentally, the risk is the wages of fear, is the share of the loot a mercenary can get if he manages, usually he manages to survive battle. So you incur risk and you get the risk. The art of money making is to preferably offload the risks on others, preferably unsuspecting others, and pocket the risk well before the consequences of the risk have eventuated.
So externalize the risk and internalize the risk.
That's it. So economists talk in terms of externality, as you just done, but to be polite, but this is how it works. And all of that is always in contradiction, big contradiction or minor contradiction. There is always contradiction in thermodynamics. So you can carry that for a long time. And the main reason why we have had so inefficient energy systems for 300 years is because of that. Because we didn't care. I mean, the decision makers intent on making money, and including politicians doing governments and so on, they didn't care. The game was to grow the economy.
Yeah.
But if you grow an economy, it will always be at the expense of something else, and eventually in killing a number of people. So now, for example, you have a number of scandals emerging. You would have heard, for example, of the forever chemicals, the famous PFAS. The numbers are striking. The chemical manufacturers producing PFAS make, we're told, about $4 billion per year in profits. The total cost of handling the consequences in terms of forever chemicals is in the order of $17 trillion per year.
Good God.
Not me saying it, it's a guy who had done the sums. And it's not just the cost, it's people get sick. Cattle get sick. All sorts of things suffer. Human and non-human life. It's covered human sacrifice because they have known it for 30, 40 years. Similarly, in terms of global warming, we know now has been publicized extensively that it's similar to what happened with tobacco. Oil companies known for decades, and sometimes known more accurately than the scientists at the time, independent scientists like J. Manson and so on, that what they were doing was lethal. But they were trapped, and I'm not blaming them, they were trapped in a cage by the money-making system. Sociologist Max Weber, a long time ago, pointed out that it took an iron cage. If you repeat the game, you're caught in the cage.
I want to go back to this cage and kind of bring in some human system dynamics as well, and also maybe apply this lens of thermodynamics to this question, which is that if our economy can be akin to a sort of living organism, which is that it needs an energy surplus in order to seek more energy and maintain itself, then the nature of things is towards growth.
No.
And so, well, okay, why not?
Okay. Humans are not entirely stupid. We are a life form, but we are the only life form on Earth able to think.
Well, hang on. No. No, that's not true. Maybe dialogue in complex manners in the way that we are, but
that's it. Okay. we're able to reflect critically on what we are doing in a way that no other life forms is able to do, as far as we can tell. Okay, so this is you mentioned just now bringing in the human component. That's called anthropology and sociology.
Well, no, actually, that's not what I'm trying to do. So maybe hang on. Pause. I'm going to pause you, and I'm going to go back to me. Because I am particularly interested in this idea that there is, how do I put this? There seems to be very little that we can actually do. Because as you said, either you prolong the energy system with devastating results, or you accelerate the decline with devastating results.
No.
There doesn't, our economy needs an energy source. As living beings, we all need energy sources.
That's right. But because we have brain, or some of us are using our brains, there is a way out. Everything that I'm saying, which is quite dire, it is dire. But because we understand it, we have found a way out. All right? So
what's that?
Before we get into that, let's notice that the situation we're in is a result of 300 years of stupidity. Okay? Trying to do something, cheating thermodynamics. Not very bright. But that is only 0.01% of the whole of humankind history over 3 million years. We have had entire societies for thousands and thousands of years that have lived without economics and without that nonsense, perfectly sustainably.
What do you mean when you say without economics?
Economics, this is where Serge Latouche, my colleague and friend Serge Latouche, comes in. He has spent a big part of his career, and he wrote a book, more or less a kind of end point of his research. I mean, he keeps doing things, but this is a very important book. Unfortunately, it's not translated in English. It's in French. And the title is L'invention de l'économie, the invention of economy. Except that in French, economy means economics and economy at the same time. So what he's showing is that this notion of economics and of economy is something which was invented, created at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. People were trading, people were using money before, but absolutely not in the way we do it.
And so what's the distinction for him? Is it that we have economic ideologies, that we have economic systems?
Economics is an ideology. It's completely disconnected from reality.
Yes.
And Serge shows there are about 28, I've extended that to 30 concepts, like labor, money, and so on, that are self-referential. So they refer to each other and only to each other. So you have a cloud of concepts which are defined by themselves and are completely disconnected. That system, mode of thinking, which is completely separated from thermodynamics and system dynamics and ecology and everything else, was emerged through exchanges between people like Smith, Ricardo, and so on, right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But people before that didn't think like that. And if you go to classic Greeks, and a number of economics that went back to look at what we can tell about the classical Greeks, around 500 BCE, Aristotle and Socrates and so on, they were explicitly critical of people trying to make money. So what I'm getting at is you have an example of a large number of societies that were trying to structure themselves, or sometimes structuring themselves very effectively, to prevent that phenomenon we call growth.
But the ancient Greeks were also using slave labor
That's
to
right.
achieve,
So
the growth of certain classes.
nothing
So
is perfect, okay? They were doing their own
that's
cheating.
far from perfect.
They were
They
sexist,
were
they were
cheating.
sexist and slave, whatever you say in English.
It's all very well to be critical of the system when you have a different way of cheating the
So
system, which
we're
is a
also
free
critical of
energy
the Greek
source.
way and so on. They are examples of societies that have managed to last for a very long time, avoiding that problem. And their ritual, their myths, and so on, were anthropologists have shown that were geared up to prevent the accumulation of power in the hand of a few and this sort of thing. So
Okay.
we have hence we know that there are ways to do things differently. But we can't go back to those systems because, as you were pointing out, okay, the Greeks at some point they started to invent democracy, but they were atrocious sexist and into slavery, for example. So we need to actually look forward and see, okay, we are in this predicament. What can we do? Okay. What we are doing is looking at how life on Earth does it. I pointed out before that life on Earth functions like a gigantic heat pump. It does exactly the reverse of what humans are doing. I mean, industrial humans. Industrial humans generate a huge amount of entropy to, for some of them, a minority of us, to have an easy time for a very short period of time. This is, 300 years is not much. Most of the 300 years were actually not very attractive. We are in the situation now since last World War where about 10% of the global population have an easy time. And the others are what we call the remainder, the leftovers. And that is working for a very short period of time, a few decades. So there is a better way. And the better way is to look at life, how life does it. Life functions as a gigantic heat pump. It uses energy enormously efficiently. The heat pump my wife and I have in our place in southern France is 440% efficient. It's interesting that this is what life does for the whole planet.
But how do we engineer that?
That's what my team and I are doing. And it's not that difficult because the technological means, the physics, the engineering, and so on to do it are available. We are not inventing, we're not generating blue sky. We're using components which are well proven, integrated in an effective way to mimic what life does. Now,
To what scale?
this is a complex conversation to explain. I don't know how long you have with me now, but
we've already overrun. So we're gonna have to keep it very tight. No more anecdotes, even though they've been really great and I've really enjoyed this.
okay.
I want to understand like to what scale this system can be deployed.
Globally,
How?
We have figured out not only how to integrate existing knowledge to do it, but how to deploy that globally initially over a period of 20 years. It's going to take a long time. But in terms of changing the game, it can still be done over 20 years. And it can be self-funding. Now, when I say self-funding, I'm cautious because I explained that economics is a fantasy. It's a perpetual motion machine fantasy. So we're not caught in there. Our system enables us to go beyond money and the use of money very rapidly. And the point is, unless we do that, most of humankind go down the gangler in a matter of decades.
What are the pieces of technology that you I mean, I assume that this would be some form of turning solar energy
Eventually, as rapidly as we can, and going to be entirely 100% solar.
Right.
Okay, but not solar in terms of photovoltaics. Concentrated solar using parabolic mirror. It's a new design.
Okay.
The point is to effectively make power available at the point of use. If you have a central power station, and if you do it very well, which is not very common worldwide, you might get 50% or 60% efficiency, which means that to do that economically, because we are still trying to cheat thermodynamics, you have very large power station. So let's say it's 50% efficient. For 1 terawatt electrical, you have 1 terawatt of entropy used pure in the atmosphere, all the rivers. All right. That's too much waste heat to use locally. If you forget about the centralized model and you shift to distributed power generation at the point of use or near the point of use, in homes, in school, in hospitals, in factories, workshops, you name it, you get to recycle the waste heat. Not only that, but you also get to harvest ambient low-grade heat around. All around us, we have ambient low-grade heat, including the entropy we have been accumulating for 300 years in the air, in the soil, and in bodies of water. So whatever is handy, wherever you are, you can tap into that. So the point is to have a mini power generation unit, mini power station at the point of use, using solar. And in most parts around the planet, there is enough sun to do it because of the high efficiency system we have developed. So you generate power, you use a small amount of that power in heat pump fashion to harvest ambient heat, low-grade heat, and you use that at the point of use. Most of the energy we use is low-grade. At the moment, for example, we use electricity, which is high-grade, a lot to make hot water. It's not very bright. You could use electricity to have heat pump functionality in your micro power station to capture ambient heat and generate heat locally for space heating, for hot water, even for baking.
So I assume that this means that most homes or buildings would have their own micro power stations. How would you power a city with something like this? And when I say city, I mean, public transport, for example.
Okay, there's one step at a time. All right. You said cities. Let's be clear that there is not one city worldwide currently which is sustainable.
Which is interesting because if you speak to people who work in sustainable design, they will say that cities are the most sustainable organizations of human living that we have.
If you do the maths, and we've done the maths, and a number of physicists have done the maths, you realize that cities are not sustainable. They are huge energy drains. Now, there's two things to look at. Unless we get our act together rapidly, if we don't do that, a lot of cities will disappear. They are the first one to be hit. Think of it. I don't know where you live, but look at when you have a point where the petrol stations around you are empty and the supermarket shelves are empty because food is not arriving.
Sure.
Within the 10-kilometer radius, they are going to find food.
Sure. There's a really awful little anecdote about the City of London, which is that for its size, it has about 3 days worth of food supply for all of its residents. So does that mean that in your model, the model of human living would be more decentralized, not concentrated in cities.
In the longer term, I think it's unavoidable.
Wouldn't that demand a huge supply of energy though?
No. The point is
relocating the vast majority of the world's population.
We are bathing year in, year out in a huge energy flux from the sun. Many times over we would ever require. So there's no shortage of energy. Humans create energy scarcity, but there is no shortage of energy around. Simply, we don't use it well. If we mimic life, and we work in decentralized fashion, we can have little power station wherever we need it, with a coefficient of performance or above 400%.
And would that include transport?
Now, the same thing can apply to transport. The same core components can be used in a stationary way or in transport. Transport, you will need to have a battery. You will need to have a fuel somehow. All right? The point is that once you've got that fuel, with the system we are developing, you effectively, roughly varies depending on the type of transport and so on, but you divide the fuel requirement by 50%, divide on half, on land, at sea, and in the air. So if you can produce that fuel sustainably, and you reduce your consumption by 50%, and in doing so you create no pollution, you have a way out. But you will have to completely transform eventually over a period of time. You will have to change the way you do transport. But what I'm saying is we have a way out to start a system of change which is affordable by mimicking what life does on Earth.
What are the critical materials, minerals and materials that would be needed for such a system?
There aren't any.
None.
Well, we have plenty of junk steel around we can recycle. We have plenty of junk aluminium around we can recycle.
Yeah.
And one component, but it's a small component, is a thin film ceramic in one part of the system. And that's dirt cheap, literally. We can do electronics. It requires a bit of electronics, but compared with what they are doing at the moment with AI, it's just ridiculous.
Sure.
We're talking very, very small amounts. So at the moment, we don't see any critical stumbling blocks in terms of material. It can scale.
I'm just thinking about the argument for centralization, which is, I'm not a proponent of this argument, but it is one that I hear.
Right.
The efficiency of materials use when you centralize one giant battery rather than giving everybody little micro power stations.
Yes, but remember what I said. To do thermodynamics properly, you have to think whole system in the dynamic way from mind to grade. If you do approach that and analyze what you're doing that way, you will realize that creating your giant mega battery somewhere actually sinks you. It looks very efficient at that point. But the whole system, when you look at the whole system, and you have to look at the whole system, because what saves your life is not the gigantic battery, it's the whole system. The name of the game is to move from Jesus 1 to Jesus 2, and Jesus 2 has to be sustainable.
No, I understand that, but why does it sink? Why using that giant battery
because to
sinks
do
you
it
thermodynamically?
On a mind-to-grade dynamic fashion, you actually drain a huge amount of energy from the system which is currently dying.
So the creation of one giant battery takes more energy than the creation of multiple smaller batteries?
No, no. It depends how you do the battery.
Well, right, yeah.
Okay, so in our approach, we want to use massively solar, concentrated solar, at or very close to the point of use. When you do that, you play with very high temperatures, typically above 1000 degrees C, preferably between 1200 and 1400 degrees C. Okay? One of the good principles of thermodynamics is don't convert energy unless you really have to.
Okay. Tell that to the hydrogen industry, but okay.
We have something at high temperature there. We keep it there. Our battery is a little block, encased in refractory of, for example, molten glass. It's cheap. It's clean. It's a high temperature, and it stays there. It's a lot easier. You don't have to mine anything with recycled glass.
Sure, but Louis, my question is, why making 100 of those mini ones versus one big one for an entire town? Why is there a difference thermodynamically?
Well, I'll just explain.
Yes, but I didn't understand. So could you explain it in a different way, please?
All right. The 100 little batteries, or 1000 or whatever, are going to be requiring a lot less energy to make and maintain than your big one.
Than one big one. Okay.
Because that big one is, let's say it has lithium in it.
No, but what if it was made of glass? What if it was made of the exact same stuff that your little ones are made of? Is that possible?
No, because if you want to transport heat-alone pipes, that's something we have done for a long time, over 100 years. You lose a lot of energy in transport. District heating works only in some few places around the planet where people live on top of each other. But when they live on top of each other, they create massive inefficiencies elsewhere. So when you do the sums, it doesn't look good.
Okay, I'm going to have to take your word for it. Yes. That is going a little bit.
All of that, remember, is 55 years of work. So explaining it in a few minutes is a bit hard. But the core principle are simply that it's not a good idea to cheat thermodynamics. If you do that, you will kill people. You swindle and kill people. So we have to imitate what nature does, because it's about 3.5 billion years of evolution. It works well, and it's not difficult to do. That's the main message. But to do that, we have to forget about thermodynamics, about economics, and the use of money. So it's a kind of Copernican revolution. It's instead of everything revolving around economics and money, we have to get in our head that to survive, we need to shift to revolving everything around thermodynamics. And it's perfectly doable. The mathematics to actually trade, do accounting and so on with that money are there. And there is even an outfit called SIX, which is the organization which is running the whole of the banking infrastructure for Switzerland and Spain, that develop scenarios about the future of money. And one of their scenarios, they surprised themselves. They realized that the technology know-how is there to actually run the show without money. Not cashless, without money at all. So we have the intelligence, we have the knowledge, the expertise, the experience to actually do it. We can get out of trouble. We are in deep trouble, but we can get out of trouble.
Well, I'm glad to end on a hopeful message after a rather dark run through our current predicament. Louis, thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really, really interesting. My final question for you is, who would you like to platform?
I would say my colleague in Australia, near Melbourne, Jason Wood. He's a seasoned engineer. He's a joint venture partner of us. He's not the same, theoretically grounded person as I am, but he's very practical, and it will complement what I've been explaining.
Excellent. Louis, thank you so much. That was a really thorough run through thermodynamics, and I think you did it really well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being inviting me and being patient with me.
Pleasure. If you want to learn more, I've put links to everything in the description box below. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you're new here and share the episode if you enjoyed it. To support the show, subscribe at planetcritical.com, where you can read the weekly newsletter inspired by each interview. You can also become a Planet Critical patron. All links are in the description box below. As always, my deepest thanks to that community. Planet Critical wouldn't exist without your support. Thank you everyone for listening and for coming on this journey together.